So what we're going to be doing for the next 5 weeks, I guess, is an expanded and more adult version of what we actually teach in the 9th grade. In the 9th grade, they learn basically the story of Yosef, but it really starts with Yaakov and his wives, because we feel that in order to understand what then subsequently happens in Shemot, but also what happens in the Sefer Melachim in terms of the division of the kingdoms and that tension between Yehuda and Yosef that really we see throughout Tanakh, Treyasar, Nevi'im Rishonim. Alex Israel actually wrote a book about Sefer Melachim where that's a major theme of his, is the tension between Yehuda and Israel. That's where it kind of starts. Where it holds particular fascination for me is my background is actually psychology. I have a bachelor's in psychology, a master's, and half of a PhD that never got finished. And similar to Aviva Zornberg's fascination with the literary and psychological value of Tanakh, I actually kind of take it from where the Ramban leaves off at the beginning of Lech Lecha, and I didn't reprint it because it's a pretty famous Ramban, but in case anybody wants to look it up, it's the first Ramban on Perek Yubet in Sefer Breshit, chapter 12, where the Ramban asks the question, similar to Rashi's question at the beginning of Sefer Breshit, if the point of the Torah is to teach us laws and to teach us morals and, to basically be life's big instruction book, why do we have all of these details in all of these stories, particularly in Sefer Breshit, including where they went, when they went, what tree they camped under, what road they took? There's like tons and tons of little details that seem minute at best and irrelevant at worst. And what the Ramban writes is he quotes from Pirkei Avot, and he says, Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim, that what happens to the fathers is like a signpost or a guide for the children. And even the very geographical locations that are central in Sefer Breshit become central in Nevi'im and Ketuvim, the centrality of Shem and the Yericho and that whole, Jordan Valley and Eretz Plishtim, and basically wherever the Avot and Imahot traveled is foreshadowing kind of what's going to become our travels. And he also goes off into lots of mystical discussions about, like, for example, we'll get to it, Yaakov at the well is a hint or is a foreshadowing to the Beit HaMikdash, and the fact that there were three flocks of sheep is a foreshadowing to the third Beit HaMikdash. He gets actually very Kabbalistic there. So I want to look at the story of Yaakov and his wives and his children, guided by the text and the medieval commentaries, but then also kind of refracted a little bit through the lens of 20th and 21st century psychology. Because it's no longer amazing, but still awing to me of how true this all rings and how it is kind of an instruction book for us as to
Tamar Glazer and Tamar Kinderler, please come to Ms. F's office.
What to do and what not to do. Okay, so let me go back before we even open the Sefer and kind of give a little bit of a crash course in the history, a quick history of the last 120, 150 years of psychological theory. We start with Freud in the late 1800s, very early 1900s. Freud is the one who kind of coins the term the unconscious, the idea that there is something, there are memories and emotions and things that get imprinted on our brains, very much like Conrad Lawrence's ducks imprinted on him, that absolutely shape the rest of our lives. And those memories are put in at a time when we don't have the language to kind of sort them out. So it's really this, hi, come on in. It's
Chizon is starting now. Make sure your team has proper representation in the big Knesset, or you could lose thousands and thousands of points. Chizon is starting now. Worth the most points in all of Color War. Maybe.
okay. It's a party. So that if you can, the way I kind of have framed it in my mind, because I always need a concrete image, it's like the unconscious mind, which is, or pre-verbal mind, is kind of like a cement pit. And experiences make their imprints in the cement, and then the cement hardens. Whether we want it to or not, it just happens. And then another layer of cement gets laid on top, and more imprints, and that hardens. And then another layer of cement, and that imprints. And by the time we get to the point of where we're like 18 to 24 months old, where we can actually use words to start controlling that cement into, our words in a way are it's not a scalpel. What's the tool that?
Etched.
Thank you. It's like an etcher, or like the thing, that you use to smooth cement and, trowel, is that what it's called? So language, and here's where, Piaget and Freud kind of come together. What happens around 18 months, 2 years old, when language...
Eliana's actor, Danielle Pasternak. Eliana's actor, Danielle Pasternak. Sarah Sverdlova. Please come up to Mrs. Detail.
Welcome. So our words basically act as a trowel, as a tool, and that's when we can start controlling the shape and the size of those imprint and those memories. And the older we get and the more language we get and the more sophisticated we get, the more we can kind of control that cement to the point that when we are adults, our verbal thoughts can often trump the actual cement memory that we have. Right? They've done lots and lots of studies of particularly when people witness accidents or witness events, right? That if the way the event is presented or is recapped for you actually reframes the way you remember it. So you go from that pre-language point where things are just left there in the cement to the point where the cement almost becomes secondary to your language. So for Freud, that shaping is what's called the ego. The ego is the conscious part of us that frames the id, the unconscious part of us, or the desire-based part of us, and frames it with words, with languages, kind of in ways that we can understand. So that, as an example, if we're angry, right, and there's a sensation that we have with that anger, with churning in the pit of your stomach, or your face feels flushed, right? So to an infant, that's an emotion. And that emotion, or that what we call anger, gets imprinted in that cement, together with all of the various things that come along with it, whether it's hunger, whether it's cold, whether it's mom's voice, dad's voice, whatever it is, dark, light, and it's all kind of a mush. As we get older, like, okay, churning in my stomach. What is that churning in my stomach? Churning in that stomach is anger. Why am I angry? Because so-and-so just said something to me that hurt my feelings. Well, I want to get rid of that churning in my stomach. My id, my unconscious, is how do you deal with unpleasantness? You get rid of it, right? But as we get older, we can kind of mediate and tell ourselves, okay, just ignore it. Or if you punch that person in the face, there are going to be consequences to your actions, and you might end up in jail or in the principal's office or wherever. And then, according to Freud, what then happens is that society has its own kind of counter force between what I want and what kind of my cognitive conscious brain tells me, and then what society tells me. And when society's force becomes too strong, that's called the superego, then we end up with guilt. Because what happens is what I want and what this external force wants comes into conflict, and it's the ego's job to mediate between them. So, as the 20th century moved along and we came to understand much more about brains and brain chemistry, and things like MRIs and CAT scans were invented, and we came to understand just in general how the body works, and the fact that, for example, that what Freud would sometimes call a psychosomatic or hysterical illness was not in fact made up, but in most cases had some kind of biological root cause, for example, migraine headaches or depression. These were not just because something went wrong somewhere along the line, but these things called neurotransmitters, which are chemicals in our brains, are somehow out of balance. And as we move further into the 21st century, we're now almost at the point where I wouldn't say most, but many of what we would call psychological illnesses, like depression, like anxiety, manic depression, schizophrenia, things, even substance abuse, is now understood to not only be a result of something that went egregiously wrong, but the fact that your brain chemistry is off kilter. And in modern parlance, mental illness is no longer what we think of mental illness as, but mental illness is just that. It's illness that affects one's mental state, like diabetes affects one's diet, and just like diabetes is a dysfunction of the pancreas, or high blood pressure is somehow a dysfunction of the heart or the kidneys or whatever, depression is a dysfunction of the brain. So that's kind of now gone to the other extreme. Where psychology kind of sits now is what's known as kind of a psychodynamic eclectic approach, which basically means nobody has one monolithic answer. There's no unified field theory of why we are the way we are. And to really understand humans, you kind of have to understand things as a system and take from a little bit of everything. This is also known as systems theory. It's also used in business. And what family systems theory in particular, the way they understand, is that every human being is a product of basically three things. Every human being is a product of their genetics, their immediate environment, and the environment of their environment. What do I mean? Right? Every single one of us in this room is a result of her particular genetics, which controls like how we interpret the environment around us, how we react. Are we more easygoing? Are we more uptight? Are we an introvert? Are we an extrovert? Are we good with risk? Are we terrified of risk? You know, do we like roller coasters? Do we, run to the opposite end of the amusement park and a merry-go-round is about as much as we can handle? That's all biological. Our immediate environment would be our parents, how we were raised, both the physical environment and the emotional environment. But then there's what's called the environment of the environment. How were your parents raised? What is their environment like at work? What are they bringing home to your environment? And then obviously, and so on and so on and so on, that Freud said biology is destiny. So like, if you're born female, you're going to be like this. If you're born male, you're going to be like this, right? A behaviorist like Skinner would tell you that you are completely by your environment, think reinforcements, punishments, whatever. And where psychology now is that it's kind of a little bit of all of the above plus human biology. So getting back to the Torah, in order to really understand Yaakov and his sons, what we really need to start with is Yaakov and his parents, and Yaakov and his parents' parents' parents. And to some degree, how Abraham and Sarah, how that impacted Yitzchak, and how Yishmael's presence impacted Yitzchak, and how Yitzchak, where he came from, and then also to start looking at Rivka and see where she came from, and the fact that Yaakov grew up with a fraternal twin. And we really need to start back a little bit further and look at that in order to somewhat understand, okay, when Yaakov walks into Haran at the beginning of Parshat Vayetze, what is the environment and the environment of his environment that he's bringing with us? Because just to start with the beginning of Parshat Vayetze, when he's 65 years old and he walks into town and he meets the chick at the well and falls in love like Romeo and Juliet reversed, and we don't understand what comes next. It doesn't make much sense. So what I'd like to start doing today is that backstory. Okay? Does this make sense so far?
Can't repeat it, but it makes sense.
As long as it makes sense, as long as it resonates, okay? All right, so let's start with the home in which Yaakov himself grew up in. We know the story, okay? That's why we don't really need the text. But the story begins with Yaakov being born a twin. His parents. Let's look at his parents. Who are his parents? Yitzchak and okay. So let's start with Rivka. She's a little bit easier. Then Yitzchak gets a little bit more complicated. Okay, so Rivka, what kind of an environment did she grow up in? First of all, what kind of a cultural environment did she grow up in?
Like completely polytheist and kind of, we know, considered like a Russia. We know that they're bad people.
Okay, so polytheistic and, according to many of the Midrashim, certainly morally suspect. Okay, what was her community like? Did she live in a rural community? Did she live in a cosmopolitan community?
No, I think it was cosmopolitan.
Very
There were a lot of
cosmopolitan.
people around.
She grew up in Haran, okay? Haran was, and archaeology has shown this, Haran was a thriving center of trade. Haran was kind of the place where the Tigris and the Euphrates came together, and it was kind of that last stop in the trade route from the interiors of what is now Iraq and Iran and Jordan and Saudi Arabia before you got to the Mediterranean. And the reverse was true also. It was like the first stop once you came ashore. Haran was your first major center that you came to. So Rivka certainly grew up in an environment that was cosmopolitan, that was eclectic. Even if you want to take the medrash on its face that she left when she was 3, I personally don't take that medrash on its face because I don't think that a 3-year-old could haul that much water. Somebody did the math. It's an astronomical amount of water, like 100 gallons or something like that, for 10 camels, if not more, maybe even 1,000 gallons. It was just a huge amount of water. And any of you who have ever pulled up water from a well, which I did once, it's not something a 3-year-old's going to do easily. But even if you don't want to take it literally, she was a little girl, but she grew up in a place where there was a lot of diversity, kind of image, of sound, of belief. The hallmark of polytheism, and one of the things that led to its cruelty, was this idea that more is better. Bigger is better. Stronger is better. Basically, the more you had, that was a sign of power and of the God's grace. So the more children, the more animals, the more money, the more crops, the more territory. It was more. So more was it. Okay, so that's where Rivka comes from that kind of a home, where that, and yet on the inside, she's still being raised by somebody who is that Semitic Terach line, and remember Terach, something had moved him to leave Ur Kasdim on his way to Canaan, but then he got stuck, you know, Guy interrupted rather than Girl interrupted. So that's Rivka. Let's look at Yitzchak. What are some of the hallmarks of Yitzchak's life?
The opposite, quite, he lived in nature, he was in solitude.
Lived in a tent, right? Sheep, tent, goats.
His parents were role models.
His parents were very positive role models.
Like a lot of Kedusha, I think, this like separateness and a focus on holiness.
Focus on holiness, on morality, monotheism,
But kindness to others, constantly bringing others into the house.
kindness to others, and a selfless kind of kindness, not a what's in it for me kind of kindness. Defining moment of Yitzchak's life. Okay, Yitzchak. Okay, now, and let's stop for a minute and think about a kid at Yitzchak. Scroll back to, you know, when you were a teenager, if you want to go according to one medrash, or when you were in your late 30s, if you want to go according to Seder Olam and Rashi, okay? You're 37 years old. Your father says to you, okay, boy, you know, hey, Yitzhak, we're going. Okay, where are we going? We're going. Saddle up the mules, take the 2 servants along. It's you and your father. You're 37 years old, not 3. You're 37 years old. You're walking along. There's a basket with coals in it that are somehow kept from going out. And then there's wood. Now, coals and wood mean what? Carbon, right? And Yitzchak says, his father, okay, I see the coals, I see the wood. Yeah, haser la'olam, right? Where's the animal? And Abraham says, well, Hashem will show us the animal. You're 37 years old, you have now been strapped. You are lying on this slab of stone. The wood is underneath you. The coals are underneath you. My guess is that wood is already starting to smoke. Your father is standing over you with a knife in his hand. What's that going to do to you?
Therapy.
Is this also a time of child sacrifice? So maybe it was considered like normal, but for polytheists, like it's very like this isn't our religion. So
Right.
what's going on?
So number one, I'm about to die
At my father's hand.
at my father's hand. Well, okay, so for everybody else around me, this is kind of normal, but I've been raised my entire life to believe that this is not normal. We don't do this. I have grown up my whole life without human sacrifice. How do you walk away from that? By the way, these are things that the Midrashim deal with. The Medrash in Tanhuma gives some beautiful discussions of interior dialogues of Abraham with what is called the Satan, but really it's an interior dialogue, and another one of Yitzchak with the Satan. Like the Medrash deals with this psychological conflict, but put yourself in Yitzchak's place. Even if you're not 37, let's assume you're a teenager. Here's your father. The knife is raised. What does that leave you with? So, in my mind, if nothing else, it leaves me really, really, really confused and traumatized. Because there's no conversation in this text between Abraham and Yitzchak. Yitzchak is lying there. He's mute. After he says, where's the sheep, we don't hear from him anymore. We don't hear Abraham anymore. All we hear is that Malach saying Abraham, and Abraham says Hineni. Whether he says it out loud or he says it in his head is unclear because it's a vision, right? It's a nevuah. And then he puts the knife down and then goes for the, all of a sudden this ram appears or is there, or whether it was there and Yitzchak kind of heard it and like, why is my father, there's an animal right over there. We don't know really what was real and what wasn't. But the weird thing is that there's no conversation that goes on between Abraham and Yitzchak where Abraham says, oh, I'm sorry, God just told me I'm wrong. I'm not supposed to sacrifice you. There's the sacrifice. We're done. Sorry. Nothing. Not only that, there's no more conversation ever between them. We don't hear Abraham after the Akedah. That's the end of Parshat Vayera, and Parshat Chayei Sarah, the only thing that we hear is Abraham saying to Eliezer, go get a wife from Yitzchak. There's no conversation between Abraham and Yitzchak at all. We never see them together again. So what does that tell us? What's Yitzchak coming into his marriage with? What's his model of marriage? You said that somebody said role models. He's 40 years old when he gets married. We know that the text tells us that, right? 40-year-old gets married. What's his image of a married couple? What is he bringing into the relationship? Sarah. So what does that mean, Sarah? What's the relationship between Abraham and Sarah? How did that work?
They were a team.
They were a team. Okay? They're a team. They're basically functional equals. Right? What else do we know about Sarah?
The measure says that she died when she heard about, she died while they were away.
Right, so he comes back, he never sees her again.
But she stated her mind always, even in the dialogue in the
Right.
Torah.
Okay, so we know that she's Abraham's equal, we know that she asserted herself, we know that, at least based on what we have in the text, that from the moment of leaving for the Akedah, Yitzchak never sees his mother again. Whatever that means, she's gone, she's dead. Okay, whether she died as a result of it, which makes a lot of sense, but she's gone. What else do we know about Sarah? What was her relationship to Abraham? Did she always stand up to him? Did she ever submit to him? Did she, do what he did? How did she work? How did they work together?
I think both.
Yeah.
She stood up and she submitted. Well, so she submitted when they went
To Egypt.
and he said, pretend you're my sister.
Right.
That's a big submission.
Right.
When she, I don't know if it was exactly stood up, but when she couldn't have children, she gave Hagar, then he said no, she said yes.
Right.
So she stood up to him.
Right.
She said he had to leave.
To get rid of
Right.
Ishmael, right? So the model of the relationship that Yitzchak is bringing in with his mind is, okay, my parents are two human beings with whom there is a give and a take. There's a dynamic. So that's my model for relationship between two members of a couple. What's my model for a relationship between parent and child?
One-sided.
One-sided. And what's that side? What is the child supposed to do? Obey. Exactly. The child is supposed to obey. Whatever the father wants, or the parents want, the child obeys. Mother wants child gone, child leaves. Father wants child as sacrifice, child gets sacrificed. So it's obey. What's Rivka's model about the relationship between parents? Do we know anything about that relationship?
Like mother seems to be invisible.
Mother seems to be invisible. And yet, what's the relationship between parent and child?
They did ask her opinion.
They
whether she
asked her.
wanted to go.
Right?
And her brother plays a very large role in the decision-making.
Brother plays a large role in the decision-making. It's the polar opposite. Each one of them is coming into this marriage with opposite views of the relationship between spouses and opposite views of the relationship between parents and children. Now they have twins. And from the get-go, these twins are different from one another. Now, if you were coming from the Yitzchak model of parent and child, which child would you think that Yitzchak would favor?
Yeah.
And similarly, Rivka should favor Esav because those children represent what they know, right? There's a wonderful psychotherapist who's written extensively about relationships. Actually, I'm thinking of two different ones. The one I'm thinking of right now, his name is Harville Hendricks. He wrote a very good book called Getting the Love You Want, A Guide for Couples. And even though it's kind of a pop psychology book, the beginning of the book is a discussion about unconscious relationships versus conscious relationships, that in our conscious mind we often behave in a relationship or seek out relationships, those things that will repair or make up for past hurts. Okay, so like if you grew up with a father who was very controlling, okay, or very, like I grew up, my father was classic Yeki, classic Teuton. Everything had to be a certain way. Like, God forbid I should have this much of my wrist on the table, I got glared at because you can't have any more than like the bottom of the hand. So one of the things that I was looking for in a mate was somebody who was more laid back and flexible and easygoing. So, I went out with 5 boys from the Midwest, married the 5th one. But then there's the unconscious, and that goes back to that cement metaphor, is that what we are familiar with from that pre-verbal state is actually what we are the most comfortable with, because it's familiar to us. It's familiar territory, which is why, unfortunately, we often end up marrying people who have also the worst traits of our parents. Or we get into close relationships with people who are on the surface not so good for us, because that which is familiar is what the pre-verbal mind defines as that which is good. Okay? So, to me, the way I see Yitzchak and Rivka is that on a conscious level, on a very conscious level, each one was seeking the opposite of what he and she were raised with. In other words, Rivka recognized the dangers of that being outside, being cosmopolitan, being with other people, so she was very happy to bond with somebody who was a little bit more introverted, somebody who was willing to speak, that home buddy. Whereas Yitzchak grew up lofty, sheltered, holy, maybe traumatized. And so, he could live vicariously through this child who was out in the world, who was a hunter, who was clearly athletic and not afraid to get himself dirty in the mud. But now let's scroll to the point where this the thing with the soup. The boys are 15. What is 15-year-old Yaakov thinking about his father Yitzchak? He's old enough now to get it. What does he want? What does every male child want?
Father's approval.
Father's approval. Like, it's really nice that mommy loves me, and it's really nice that mommy thinks I'm a little tzaddik, but that's not what I want. I don't want mommy's approval. I want daddy's approval, and doesn't daddy see that I'm just like Zadie? That I'm just like Saba? That I am that Abraham that just passed away, that gentle soul who values kindness and chesed and da-da-da-da-da. Of course, he doesn't quite see that Abraham also valued being out in the world and having to be conniving and lie a little if he needed to survive. See, Abraham is Yitzchak and Yaakov and Esav put together. What's happened is that it's gotten divided. And what does Esav say when he's like, okay, sell me that firstbornness. Sell me your link to your father, to our grandfather. What's his response to that? Does Does he say no? Does he argue? He's like heck I won't?
No, show me that you can go out into the world and bring
Right.
back
Right, but what does Asaph say? He says, give me, I'm gonna die, I need some soup, I'm really
Of what
hungry.
use is this to me?
What is the use of it? I don't care. You never quite, careful what you wish for. He doesn't care. That's why it says, Vayivez et ha'bechorah. So not only is he squandering the economics, but basically what he's saying to Yaakov is like, oh, I don't care that our father favors me. Who cares? I have no use for this. If I don't eat, if I don't satisfy my physical needs, I'm going to die. So here's 15-year-old Yaakov, who probably knows that he has some ill-gotten gains, who knows that he hasn't really gotten what he wants, and yet he knows that it's kind of legally his, and he's walking through the next 50 years of his life with this ambivalence. I know that we can all look back at a time when, last week, forget about, when we were 15, 16, 17 years old, where on the one hand we really, really, really wanted something, and then we finally got it, but we know that we didn't really have it. And so you're always walking around like this, because it's like if I let go for a second, I'm going to lose what I have. And if I have to fight so hard to hold on to what I have, what use is it even having it? And then you end up with really sore hands and sore shoulders and sore backs, and then you wonder why you get migraines. So this is Yaakov. Oh, wait, there's more. Then his mother tells him to out and out lie to this father whose approval he wants so desperately. And what does Yaakov say?
We'll pick up on it. How can I?
And I'll get cursed in the end.
Right. For the first time, he defies his parents. It's like, if he's going to find out. And not only am I not going to get his love, I'm going to lose his love, and I'm going to get cursed. And Rivka says, Alai klalatcha b'ni. This is already in Toldot. The curse, your curse will be on me. Except it's not. What baggage is Yaakov taking with him, even though he has nothing in his hands, when he leaves Haran?
Yeah. I mean, he's being chased.
Right, okay, so his brother wants to kill him, that's number one. What's number two?
He tricked and lied to his father.
He tricked and lied to his father. He knows it. His father knows it. His father knows that he knows it. He knows that his father knows. And what about Rivka?
You're never going to see her again.
Never going to see her again. This is how he leaves. So this is now where kind of our story of Yaakov, we have to remember that according to Seder Olam, according to the way the Gemara and then subsequently Rashi figures it out, he is 65 years old at this moment in time. Now again, whether you want to take it on face value that he's 65, not 65, he is a fully mature, middle-aged adult. He's not a little boy. And this stuff that he's been living through has been brewing for 50 years, at least. All right? So now he leaves. So now we're in Parshanut Vayetze, and that's where we're going to start. I think it's Kaf 28, verse 11. Something like that. It's chapter 28, Kafchet, Pasuk Yud Al, sorry, 11. Okay? Verse 11. Pasuk Yud. Vayetze Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva, Vayelech Haran. What is hidden, or what is buried, not buried, embedded, sorry, I don't have much language today, in those words? What does it mean that Yaakov went out from the Beersheba and he went to Haran? Really simple words, lots of layers.
It's the end of that time when he's in his parents' home and he has to leave all that
Okay, so
behind.
what does Beersheba represent? Let's play word association, because word association in Tanakh is important. So Beersheba is home. What else is Beersheba? If I were to say Midan ve'ad Beersheba, what does that mean? Right? It's the southern edge of our land. Okay? So and what is Vayetze mean? You think of that shoresh, Latzeit. Yitziat Mitzrayim. Yeah, but it's not just, go out the door.
Like departing.
Depart, leave, done, we're done, we are out of here. Okay? Vayetze is not just to walk out the door with the intention of coming back again. It is a one-way ticket. So he is leaving, ostensibly permanently, not only a city, but a homeland, a culture, a mindset, kedusha, whatever. Vayelech Haran, and he went to Haran. Now what's Haran? What does Haran represent?
Rivka's home was,
His mother's home. What does his mother's home represent?
A lot of culture.
Culture, right? But
otherness.
other nations, avodah zarah, polytheism. What else? There should be kind of a little bit of a chiastic bell. Vayelech Harana. Go backwards, 2 generations.
Like Abram was told to leave, to get out.
Right? Lech lecha, leave Haran. Imagine the sense of failure. I'm going back to where God told my father to leave from. And now I'm leaving the land, I'm leaving the place where God promised my father and grandfather. And now I'm leaving. So if you were Yaakov, who would you be mad at this point?
Rivka.
Mother? What did you think?
I said Rivka.
Rivka?
It was just the whole plan went awry.
The whole plan ran awry. Who else is he going to be mad at?
Maybe God.
Maybe God. Like, God, hi, where are you? You made a promise to my father. My father almost died for the sake of that promise. You made a promise to my grandfather. My grandfather left home with nothing except for his wife and his nephew. And, whatever he had that he had made in Haran, right? Traveled, and remember, you have to always remember, they're doing this on foot or on muleback, right? They're traveling from Haran, which is in northern Syria, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles over wadis and mountains and plains and desert and, and Beersheva's another desert, and like, the terrain is not, it's not like, like once you get over the continental divide in the Appalachians, it's flat until you get to Colorado, and at the highest thing there is a speed bump. That's not what this terrain is like. This is this, and it's hot, and it's cold, and there are scorpions, and there are bugs, and there are spiders, and there are snakes, and there are robbers, and there are lions, and this is not an easy journey. And now I have to leave, and I have to go back to and here I am, a nice yeshiva bacher, right? I'm ish tam yoshev ohalim. The last thing I want to do is be out. I want to be in. I'm an introvert. I'm a Talmid Chacham. I like to study. I like to sit under the trees and philosophize and lie on my back at night and look at the stars and wonder where the universe ends. And now you're sending me out of this place of God into this place of noise and activity, and I'm clueless. So this is what he leaves with. And then God sends him a dream. Okay, so this is his first encounter with God. And the dream changes stuff a lot. What does the dream tell him. Effectively. Not
Like,
just,
I haven't forsaken you.
Right.
There's a plan here.
There's a plan, right?
There's gonna be ups and downs.
There's going to be ups and downs, right? There's ups and downs and ups and downs, but I'm with you, there are angels with you, this is okay, this is part of the plan. So then, at the beginning of Perek Kaf Tet, Pasuk Aleph, it says, Vayisa Yaakov Raglav, Vayelech Arza B'nei Kev.
He doesn't use Haran anymore.
What is B'nai Kev?
The days of yore.
What does that mean? The land of the children of the days of yore.
Eastern.
Okay, Kedem could mean east, it could mean earlier. Where's he going to now? Right, but what does B'nai Kedem mean?
Well, like it was the place of his ancestors, so there's a connection.
There's a connection. He's not just going to some place, but he's going to his ancestor's place. And not only is he going to his ancestor's place, the concept of Kedem, right? Vayita gan be'eden mi Kedem. Right? There's this concept that Kedem can also be paradise. So it's like, no longer is he going to Haran, but he's going to a place where he does have a connection. Not only does he have a connection, but there's a potential holiness there because God told him to go there, just like there's a holiness in Canaan because God told his grandfather to go there. And the Mefarshim here say, why does it say that he lifted up his legs and he went, this is one of the first things I do with my 9th graders. I, get some volunteer, usually the quietest girl in the room. I say, okay, go walk to the door. And because she's the quietest girl in the room, she'll do it. Actually, they'll all do it. And they remember, then they walk to the door, and then I say to the other girls, I'm like, okay, so I had her walk to the door. In order to walk from here to the door, what do you have to do? Lift up your legs, right? So why does it say, and he lifted up his legs and he went? Why can't it just say, and he went? And the commentaries jump in here, and he says because the lifting up of his legs was really a lifting up of his spirit. Like, okay.
Now he had a purpose.
Now he had a purpose. Now he had a goal. Okay, he doesn't necessarily have clarity when he leaves, but he does have a goal and a purpose. And he's no longer leaving, he is heading. There's no more Vayetse, there's Vayisa and Vayelech. Right? Vayisa, that also reminds us of the Aron. Right? The Aron was lifted, or Vayisa ha'anan, that the cloud was lifted. All of these words have, I always say, Hebrew is very, very vocabulary poor, and as a result, very, very meaning rich. There aren't that many verbs, and therefore all of the verbs have multiple layers and connotations, and you kind of have to always play that little game of Hebrew telephone association when you hit verbs. So he goes Arza B'nai Kedem, Vayar V'hinei Be'er, and he sees a well. He knows wells. There's a story in his family about a well. So he's coming in with the story. What's the story?
His mother.
Right, that's where we found his mother. Okay, so there's a well, and it's, by the way, it's in the middle of a field, which is a very weird place for a well to be. That's the word, whenever you see the word hinei in Chumash, this is cardinal rule of the word hinei. Hinei is a flag. Hinei is like, okay, something unusual, something weird is happening, please pay attention. Anytime you see the word hinei, right, just that's it doesn't, the translation is behold, but that doesn't really tell you what it is. So there's a well in the middle of the field. That's very weird because normally where are you going to find a well? Okay, it is an oasis, but normally where there's a well, there's a town or a home or a farm or something, right? That's what the 9th graders here learn in their ancient civilizations class, right? Where there is water, there is civilization. You find a well, you find an oasis, you build something around it, and yet there's this well in the middle of a field. And not only is there a well in the middle of a field, but there are 3 flocks of sheep, and they are sitting and resting with their little legs tucked under them by the well, and the stone is on the well. Yaakov kind of scratches his head. He's like, okay, this is odd. Now, again, you're a stranger. You're Yaakov. What would you normally keep doing? Keep going. Right?
They needed water.
What?
Yeah.
He needed water.
Wouldn't you need a well, I'm just, again, archaeology, a well in the middle of the fields to water the fields, to give water to the sheep? Like, wouldn't that be also make sense?
Except a sadeh isn't a cultivated, in this case it's not cultivated, it's just, it seems like it was some kind of natural underground spring that they had discovered and contained, but yes, but that's not usually how it worked. In other words, animals were normally watered either at the well in the center of town, a la Rivka and a la Tzipora and the daughters of Yitro, or they were watered at some kind of a natural running spring, brook, something, the way David HaMelech describes it. It's unusual to find this concept of a well, which is some kind of a human structure in the middle of non-cultivated area. That's just, and it doesn't seem like it was being used for irrigation. It seems like they're using it to water their sheep.
Also, if it is there, it means that there isn't, no one would build a well there unless it was needed.
Correct.
So it's probably a long distance from the nearest well,
Right.
which is why Yaakov didn't pick up and go, because, it wasn't going to be, because people wouldn't have bothered to search out water unless there was a long distance from the nearest
Right.
source.
So he sees these guys sitting around, and the first thing that he says to them makes sense. What's the first thing that he says? Vayomer lehem Yaakov, achai, bros, my brothers. Me'ayin atem, where are you from? Vayomer mecharan ana. Vayomer lehem hayadatem et Lavan ben Nahor. Vayomru yada. Okay. Vayomer lehem hashalom. Is he okay? Vayomru shalom. V'hinei Rachel bito ba'a im hatzor. Great. Wonderful. What should have happened next?
Introduce himself to Rachel?
Right. Or he's on his way to Haran. His instructions are to go to Lavan and Betuel in Haran, or Lavan in Haran. What would you have expected him to do at this point?
Continue
Keep
to
going.
see nearly
Keep
there.
going, right? Or say to them, okay, which way to Haran?
Right.
Or to come up to Rachel and say, hi, which way to, or not to say anything at all. So the next sentence is very weird, but it's very indicative of Yaakov. What does he say?
He's suggesting that they quickly feed water the flock and then go back to work.
Right.
He becomes a boss.
He becomes a boss. He butts in. And he says, Vayomer hein od hayom gadol lo eit he'asof hamikneh hishku hatzon ulechu re'u. Right? How to win friends and influence people? What kind of people start making pronouncements like this? What can this tell us about, again, the baggage of the personality that he's coming with?
First of all, he's coming from the country. He's like the bumpkin who landed in Cosmopolitan Haran. So he doesn't know how to behave socially with any of them. He just says whatever's on his mind.
Okay, so that's option one. He's a little clueless, right? He's the redneck come to the city.
He's entitled.
Yes,
Okay.
anytime.
There's a sense of entitlement,
Because he comes from the top of the society.
right? So there's a sense that he can tell people what to do. What else?
Maybe he's asking them to hurry up, leave, so he could talk to Rachel alone.
Which is what one of the Medrashim says, and one of the Mefarshim on the page on it says that he's this is a ruse. He wants to get rid of that. So you could say he's pragmatic and he thinks on his feet. What else? Why is he telling them how to do their jobs?
Well, that's what he did.
Okay, so he feels he is an expert. So he's coming with maybe not entitlement, but a certain sense of confidence. What else is he, by telling somebody, go back to work, what are you effectively telling them? You're lazy. You're being lazy. So there might be a moral indictment. Rashi brings down here that he actually was concerned for economic justice. He says, look, here's the bottom line. If these are your sheep, you're cheating yourselves by wasting the day away because, when sheep don't graze, they don't make milk or wool or whatever it is, they need food. And if they belong to somebody else, then you're wasting your master's time and money, right? It's like if you hire a secretary or you hire a babysitter and you come home and the babysitter's sitting in front of the TV and, the babysitter's sitting in front of the TV and the kids are somewhere else sitting in front of the TV and you didn't want the kids to be watching TV, you wanted the kids to be playing outside or coloring or doing whatever, and the secretary was supposed to be doing X, Y, and Z, and instead she's sitting there, shopping on Amazon. So Rashi says, actually what's going on here is Yaakov is concerned about the economics, and what I believe Rashi is trying to show us is that Yaakov is not a cheater by nature. Even though he just cheated his father, or lied to his father, that's not who his essence is. Another possibility that I want to throw out to you is that rather than an entitlement, there's actually kind of a defensiveness. Right? And I'm taking this out of Rashi and out of the Midrash, is that Yaakov knows he has just lied to his father. Yaakov knows he has just walked away with something that he didn't earn, didn't deserve. And he's highly sensitive to that whole interaction of didn't earn, didn't deserve God anyway. And he's like, okay, you're not supposed to get what you don't earn. So there are numbers of ways to read Yaakov in this pasuk, and the Mefarshim and the Midrashim read him that way. But in any case, then the shepherds respond, that response, well, we can't move the rock. And while they're having this conversation, Rachel is coming closer to them, and when, in this wonderful Shakespearean scene, I'm up to verse 10, and it is when Vayika asher ro'eh Yaakov et Rachel bat Lavan achi imo ve'et tzon Lavan bat imo vayigash Yaakov vayagel et ha'even me'al pi haba'er vayashk et hatzon Lavan achi imo. Is it right? So there's the fact that Lavan, his mother's brother, that becomes a leitmotif, a milah mancha in this pasuk, and is very possibly a foreshadowing. Like here, his whole raison d'etre coming to Haran is because of Lavan, his mother's brother, and yet this same kinsman is going to cheat him blind. But he's overcome with love, and he's overcome, or at least overcome with emotion, and that emotion continues in the next pasuk, because it says, Vayishak Yaakov l'Rachel vayisa et kolo vayeh, which tells us other things about Yaakov. What else does it tell us about Yaakov?
He's really homesick.
He's homesick.
Or it was a release of tension
Release
until
of
he got
tension,
there.
right? He's an emotional man. He's a very sensitive, again, he's that ish tam yoshev ohavim. He feels things. So this is as opposed to Esau, who is a Yodea, Yodea, Ish Sadeh Tzayid Bifiv, right? He is he's a little bit more inured to pain, to hardship. You have to be. If you're a hunter, you have to be willing to sit in a crouch for hours sometimes. You have to be willing to sit in a tree. You have to do whatever it takes to catch that animal, and you either have to be tolerant of it or you might actually enjoy it. Right? It's like these people who do Ironman or who do, what's the thing where you run through the mud? I don't know, these endurance things, like I was like, or marathon runners, like why do they do this? So you have to be getting something out of it, like you have to at the very least be able to tolerate it, and you have to get something out of it, because otherwise, I don't know anybody who would run for 26 miles if they don't get something out of it. Because from everything that I've read about marathoning, it is not a pleasant thing to do. So Esav is definitely less sensitive, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, it's kind of, again, that biology. Yaakov is a very, very sensitive guy, which means everything that happens to him he's going to feel very deeply. And it's this, emotionalism that continues and then kind of hits it's apogee, where the Torah tells us, and as far as I know, this is the only time where love between a man and a woman is mentioned before marriage, right? He goes back to Lavan's house and he lives there for a month, and Lavan says, okay, so you've lived with me for a month and you've worked for me for free, so, name your wage. And then the Torah takes this little aside and it describes Rachel and Leah and how they look, and we'll talk more about that this week. And then it says, Vaye'ahav Yaakov et Rachel, Amin Pasuk Yud Chet 18, Vayomer et evatcha sheva shanim berachel itcha aktana. What motivates Yaakov, drives him emotional, is feeling pain, joy, fear, guilt, love. He probably is as emotional as his father was stoic.
Alright, it's time for Mincha! Everyone please make your way to the Beit Knesset. No one should be doing anything else besides for coming to Beit Knesset for Mincha. Thank you.
Mincha! Okay, so that's my cue, because I have to go in for Mincha. And this is perfect, because it's actually where I wanted to stop anyway. Questions before we... Mincha's without a minyan, so... Any questions? Thoughts?
Sounds exciting, the new
Right.
approach.
Thank you. So next week we're going to get more into the Mefarshim. We're going to get into this whole, Rachel and Yaakov, Rachel and Leah. Marsha, can you turn it off for me, please? I have
Maybe.
no idea how to do it.
I don't know how to do it.
I think it's an off
Somebody
button
know?
somewhere.
There's a button.
There's like a red button I think you're supposed to press.